A facilitator has to be like throwing an arrow, practicing archery, because you need to find that perfect question that hits the sweet spot. I do fun questions. How do you feel at the start of a session if this state of yours would be a drink? Do you arrive like an energy drink? Are you arriving like a matcha tea, as a coffee? Because you can relate to that. Brené Brown, she pretty much says the key for emotional connection, one of the key things is being a story steward as a facilitator. Take care of the stories people tell you, value them, honor them, keep them, and believe them.
From the city of Peaky Blinders, Birmingham, England, I would like to introduce you to Paddy Danda.
As the world becomes more automated and the robots take over, it's imperative that we build the right human skills for the future. So pull up a chair, grab a samosa or two, and make yourself very uncomfortable.
Hey, Antonio. Sorry, let me start again. Hey, Antonio, thank you so much for joining me today. I would love to know what superpower you want to bring to this particular episode.
That's a pretty good question. I have many, so if you want to grab one of those and follow along, one of them, of course, is creativity. I think sounds a bit egotistical, but it's not. People say that I'm a bit of a creative, friends at work, a couple of friends. I'm always figuring out new ideas. I'm a bit of a curious person, so I always ask. So I think creativity will be one. Another of my superpowers you may know because we knew each other from that. It's visual thinking. I think I use a lot of visuals. I use a lot of visual metaphors. Facilitation. I think my element, as Ken Robinson would say, it's I think where I love to be is facilitating groups. I'm also a magician. I've been a magician for almost 20 years, performing magic, studying magic. I always read magic. I'm always with a pack of cards playing around. So I'm also an HSP, a highly sensitive person. I'm a sensitive person, so I deal a lot with emotions. I overwhelm quickly, so I need to have strategies for that. So there you are. I have more, but I'm a father. I think that also contributes. I'm a person that talks about superpowers, so I'm quite in touch with what you say. So I don't have just one. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers that because I don't have just one, but I think those are most of the superpowers I use daily on a daily basis.
Oh, wow. I mean, I certainly know you for your visual thinking superpowers because you were amazing on a recent event that we held, which is for the Visual Jam. So that was incredible to see you in action. But I didn't know you were a magician. So that's a really cool one. I've always wanted to sort of incorporate magic in my presenting. I think it'd be so cool to kind of go up on stage and actually do some magic tricks and then link that into a talk. So I'm very envious of that superpower. Yeah.
There's a facilitator that uses magic, which he's from India. He's called Tyagi with THIAGI. He uses magic to facilitate because magic is a great conduit to, not just to have fun, but also connects people to another level. It creates awe, it creates wonder, and those emotions are not that common. So when you do an activity, something that it has magic as a tool, it helps to to make groups more cohesive, to make people laugh, So it's a great tool for facilitators in your arsenal. So yeah, it's fun to use it. When I show a magic trick to people, they are like, "What?" And I can talk with them about something else. It doesn't get that serious. You connect with them in another level. You show them you're pretty much also traveling to another world. So it's fun to see people how they react because it's something that it's not normal. When you ask, what's something weird about you, a superpower, most of the times people are not aware of the superpower. You need to sometimes ask what others say from you that it's something different, that is something different that you do. And magic, when I tell people that, they're like, really? I'm also an engineer. So an engineer that does magic, that is a designer, weird.
Oh, well, I think that's what makes us even more interesting when we have all of these other layers to us. So that's brilliant to hear. And so, Antonio, you mentioned before we kicked off that you're a facilitator, and I am really intrigued and always looking for new tips myself because I want to up my game as well. So,
Yeah.
love to explore that a little bit more with you around some of the some of the ways in which you incorporate all of these superpowers into your facilitation. So we talked about visual thinking there. How does visual thinking play a part in your facilitation?
Yeah. I think for me it's a key part because pretty much what I design in a workshop it's pretty much visual. I try always to incorporate a metaphor, an idea. Maybe ask yourself the question: if your workshop were an image or a metaphor, what would it be? I think that helps a lot to put the focus in that. Or maybe if you want to have some sort of conducting thread, throughout the session, what would it be? Would it be a story from someone? Would it be a metaphor? For instance, if you want to teach a methodology, for creating a pitch, if that pitch method were an image, what would it be? What metaphor, Maybe would it be a bird with wings and each of the feathers would be the part of the metaphor of the method? So I think visual thinking helps you to be strategic, when you understand visual thinking, not just as images plus text, but a way to synthesize, and to make things clearer. You figure out that visual thinking is strategic. So it helps you to convey your ideas better. I think to make, for instance, when I create a workshop, I always try to provide a couple of powerful metaphors. So, for instance, when you talk about superpowers, I try to convey the idea that maybe of Superman, right? You show Superman, and when you ask maybe the word superpower, it's not that powerful than when you put a picture of Captain America, maybe. Uh, as they say, an image speaks better than 1,000 words. And I think that's true in a workshop. I try to be simpler with workshops. Most of the times we use PowerPoints, as a way to read what we are saying. And I think that's a mistake. I think when you are in a workshop, you need to experience has to be above content. So pretty much what you content, the PPT, the PowerPoint is pretty much, you may think of it as some sort of a small spark that ignites people to talk. I think that's a big difference when you do a TED talk or you do a talk and being a facilitator when you put the focus on them. So for instance, instead of writing, do an exercise, blah, 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 blah. Hey, what would be an image? So for instance, put an image of a garden. Okay. What seeds can you plant on this group to make them more collaborative? Okay. What is your contribution? What is your seed? So put that image instead of putting many words and blah, blah, blah. Maybe try to convey it with an image. Make that challenge for yourself. I think that improves your communication much better because you pretty much think, how do I convey the idea instead of putting things into words, which sometimes makes it a bit more convoluted.
Yeah, I mean, metaphors are great, right? They're so powerful when you use that visual metaphor
Yeah.
to make complex things simple and for people to really grasp a concept. It's amazing. And as you mentioned there, for collaboration, as soon as we get people to start maybe filling in the visual, if we're using the visual as a structure to elicit ideas, for example, then it can be fantastic seeing that in action. And so I know you're very focused on the human skills and the human side of things. So, how do you create connection in a workshop? What are some of the
Yeah.
tips and tricks that you kind of use?
Yeah. 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 Funnily enough, when people give me feedback of what I do, what do you like about it? It's not the visuals. And for instance, a colleague told me recently, a few months ago, that I pretty much, and yeah, she used the word magic. So I create the magic for people just to see one another and talk with one another. So pretty much what I do mainly is I provide space for people to talk. I think that's something we missed, we forget, but because we concerned a lot with the PPT, the content, that it looks pro, that it looks cool, but we forget. I don't know it. For instance, I can ask to you, when you see a talk, can you identify, of the 100 talks that you've seen, how many of them do they provide a good space, for instance, 30 minutes, an hour, for people to talk with one another? I imagine you don't remember as many. That most of the times it's like a Q&A, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Hey guys, sorry, we're up. We only have time for 1 or 2. That's 80% of the talks. So I do it backwards. I say, for an hour of presentation, hey, 20 minutes content, 40 minutes people talk with one another. How? Good questions. I think that's key for a facilitator. A facilitator has to be like, I don't know, like throwing an arrow, practicing archery, because you need to find that perfect question that is like, that hits the sweet spot. I think that's key for a facilitator. What question would you do for people to talk with one another? So make a question for them to be curious. So instead, if you want to teach them about pitch, you may ask them, hey, from 1 to 10, how would I evaluate myself in terms of communicating ideas to others? Okay, why? And instead of asking to the group, and like in an open session, make people talk in pairs, in threes. Make them discuss about it. So another thing I would do to create connection for the start, the famous check-in. It's it's a common use word, fashionable for facilitators. Hey, do a cool check-in. For me, a good question, for instance, regarding superpowers would be, what is your main superpower? And I make people to share the superpower with one another, not just in the main room. And I create pairs. So that creates intimacy, that people can relate to something. So I don't go all out on talking about high concepts like pitch. So I ask them something practical. So for instance, even for a check-in, I do fun questions. It's how do you feel at the start of a session? If this state of yours would be a drink. So how would you arrive, Patty, to this session? Do you arrive like an energy drink? Are you arriving like a matcha tea, as a coffee? Because you can relate to that. Instead of just asking high-level questions, you can create connection at the start, making people talk with one another, or maybe make a simple question, but that people can relate. What was the last thing you remember you created? If we're talking about creativity, what was the last idea you created? Or for instance, I make the question, do you believe yourself as a creative? If not, hey, for instance, Patty, when was the last time you solved a problem or you helped someone? Hey, you were creative there. Because we sometimes tend to overestimate the importance of high concepts instead of asking a simpler question. So I think as facilitators, make the simple question, create space for people to talk, and pretty much the content can be on a third or a second place before the important questions. So design good questions, for me, would be the answer. Design precise questions that people can relate and create a space for people to share. I think one of the main things when you're a good facilitator is when people feel they could share and they were given the space, and maybe you were, even if it's a group of 100 people, if you created a group of 2 and you let people talk at least for 3 minutes, people feel intimacy. So I think that's key also. Design things in order for you to make good questions and let people share with one another. That also creates a great environment.
Oh, thank you for that. And I couldn't agree more. I love those intriguing questions, not the, oh, how are you feeling? But the way you put that there, it was associated to a drink that we're all familiar with. And that just
a song, or a song. What song that it communicates how you leave the session or you enter the session? Hey, I feel like, I don't know, a song from Bruno Mars, or do I feel like a song from Dolly Parton? I don't know, or like a song from one of your playlists, a cool song, a dance, Indian fusion song. That relates. Instead of asking, when you ask people, how do you feel? Most of the time they tell you good, bad, and that's it. Not all people tell you that they are sad, but if you ask them in a way they can relate, using a metaphor, that, that helps a lot.
I'm feeling like this might be a good trick for your children when they come back from school, right? Instead of saying, "How was your day?" Let's ask them to compare it to something that they're familiar with in this way. That could be pretty interesting. I might try that today. Let's see.
Yeah, maybe you could use, stickers like Paw Patrol. For instance, what I use also, you may make made me remember. I use a lot of uh, card games or cards like Dixit. Because Dixit are metaphorical, or a game that it's called Iconicus. I don't know if you've heard about that game. They are squared cards with icons. So you have an icon of thunder, a cloud. So you could also use that for a check-in, because people generally, when you start from the get-go and you don't know people, they won't express how they feel. They won't tell you, "Hey, I'm sad because I lost my mother a year ago." I don't know. They won't. But if you use symbols, you use metaphors, or you use, as you say, a different way, and you start people to talk with one another. How was your day? Can you name a thing that was good from your day? Can you name something that was the best from your day? Was it walking? Was it pretty much looking above? Was it hugging your child? I think those simple questions create connection. You just have to be genuine. And for instance, for you, Patty, what are the things that move you? Is it music? Okay, let's put on a track that gets people going and tell them your story. I think that's another thing I didn't tell you, that I think one of the main things that create connection are stories. When people stop conceptualizing and talking up in theory, I think that people are, no, tell your story. Tell what you've gone through. Okay, if we're talking about creativity, tell me a time where you felt creative or you saw someone being creative. Patty, tell me one time where you felt energized. Hey, last time was with my family and I did this. I think that makes conversations richer. It doesn't create a distance. I think stories are, for me today, are a essential part. If I don't share what I'm gone through, even try to be personal, how can you expect people to do the same if you are talking from a distance like an expert? I think that's also a key for a facilitator. You have to put yourself on the arena with people, not apart from them.
I think the process of recording these podcast episodes has really helped me try and hone down on my sort of questioning techniques and abilities. I'm still a work in progress, but it certainly, for me, has been a journey of learning in terms of, I remember my early episodes, I was asking all sorts of questions, and now I try and be really intentional about what I'm asking, because sometimes time is short and it's really important that we get the good stuff from our guests. So that's why I think questions are just so important, and it helps in so many different ways. And for me, it's really helped me with my sort of small talk as well. When I'm out and about at, say, a conference and I'm trying to network with people, it really gets you to think about, well, what would that first question be that you ask that person? And I really like some of those questions you just mentioned there. So again, I'm going to add them to my little black book, and I'm sure they'll be coming out at some point. Now, the other thing, Antonio, I know you're super interested in is creativity. And I believe you're writing a book currently as
Yeah.
well. So could you tell us more about creativity, and what is the role of creativity when it comes to the world of work and even
Yeah.
facilitation?
Yeah. Funnily enough, I think I'm writing a book that it's a bit counterintuitive, because I think what I pose as a concept in creativity is different. When you see a lot of things, you see agile creativity. You see things related to doing that, and pretty much, yeah, to make a shorter pitch as possible. The concept is slow creativity. So that pretty much, when you see creativity in history, you always see that creativity has to do with tons of ideas, and processes and whatever. And I go a bit, I slow down a little and I back up a little. I think that creativity, first of all, one main definition to start talking about creativity is not about being, it's about tuning. It's not whether Patty is a creative or not. The question is Patty does have the environment, does it have the conditions to connect to creativity? And that is why all of us can be creative, because it doesn't have to do with our superpowers. You can also, of course, you use it, but it's not about like a recipe for creativity, Paddy can be tremendously creative if he connects and tunes to different things that has to do with yourself. So it I created that idea from a couple of authors, one of them being my friend Sunny Brown from Game Storming. She talks a lot with that, but when you read about creativity, they talk a lot about the idea of ether of creativity, right? Like that space, we can look at it as of us being bees in an infinite garden. I like also that idea, because when you see ideas not from being from yours, instead of being in an ether of creativity, you see why people, if you don't come up with an idea, someone comes up with a similar idea. And we've seen examples of creatives that have similar discoveries. And I think that is coherent with that idea. So first, creativity is about tuning, not about being. And of course, when you see this, the idea of slow creativity blossoms, and slow is an acronym. So S has to do with yourself. And I think superpowers are key. When you connect with what you are, how weird you are, your superpowers, you can get enormously creative. But if you're not genuine, you're not authentic, I think you lose creativity, because you try to be someone else. You try to create the ideas according to someone else's precepts, or how they are. I think one of the key things is connecting. I talk about 3 levels, connecting to your spikiness, what makes you weird, like it makes you a really rare being. Connects to your embrace your multitudes. I like the idea of Walt Whitman. He says pretty much we are many, we embrace multitudes. He is from a poem of his. And I like the idea because we're weird, but also we are many things. Paddy is not just a facilitator. He's a father. He's a professional. He's a mentor. Those many things, you integrate them, you can be so much creative. And probably if I ask you personally, your best ideas probably come up when you gather all those weird stuff. So for instance, one thing I thought tremendously great about you was the idea how you mix in Indian music, Hindi music with, you create fusions. And I found that tremendously weird and unique. So whenever I remember you, I remember the music, for instance. And that's lovely. I think that's something that should be valued. And I think not many people put focus into that. So that's the S. Focusing on yourself, on your multitudes, on your spikiness or weirdness, and in your journey. I think embracing your journey. You're not the same as you said from this podcast episode, from the last 100 episodes ago or 50 episodes ago. You're so much different. So I think you also have to see that journey in order to be more creative, The L part from slow is about lila, which is a concept from Sanskrit that a lot of authors use. Even Daniel Goleman from the emotional intelligence, he uses that concept, and many authors, Stuart Brown, many authors known in creativity and emotions and playing. Lila means cosmic play. So I think in order to tune, to be more creative, you have to play. And we can go forward in many ways. You can do a free play type of playing, or you can do deliberate play, play with an intention. You have a mission, an objective, and you play. So that's why gamification, I think it's a great tool to use that as play. And one of the critiques where there's a current critique about playing with kids, or in kids education, that they use play as something you do on your spare time instead of using play as a cross-centered tool across all disciplines. I think that's important. Well, that's play. It has many facets, but I think one of the main things is you need to continue playing. And a lovely concept is one from James Cars. He was the one who inspired Simon Sinek to write The Infinite Game. I don't know if the author started with Y, but he also authored a book which is called The Infinite Game. And The Infinite Game pretty much says, it's not about winning or losing. It's about keep playing, for the sake of it, because it gives you pleasure, because when you play, nature also plays, and it's not always a sum-zero game. I think that's also a mistake. So I think you play because you love playing, because play has kept us alive, even as a human being. So L for Lila, play. O, which is O for obsess, but obsess with purpose. I think obsession has been a thing that has gone through history, and you hear many facets of it. One of them is purpose, intention, Another concept is grit from Angela Duckworth. She calls pretty much that it's not about talent, it's about effort, skills, and pretty more than that, perseverance, I think. So obsessed with purpose, grit, and of course, flow. I think Mihai Csikszentmihalyi talks about flow, and it's so important when you enter into that state, because you're obsessed with something and you enter a different kind of world. Imagine you have entered into flow when working with Grant, your pal in Visual Jam. With your kids, you've entered into flow when you start playing with them and you forget that time even exists. I think obsessing is an important part of being creative. When you start getting into the flow, when you're persistent, when you have a purpose, it drives you to something, and many things, and many examples, I don't know, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, that are obsessed with something and they continue to persevere on that. Even guys like Elon Musk, or Steve Jobs were obsessive, or Mark Zuckerberg, were obsessive with what they did. And they persevered even when people told them not to. So, and finally, W, which is a word, I use it as wonder, or a Chinese word which is called Wu Wei. Wu Wei, I don't know if you've heard about that word. It pretty much means stop doing. So if you want to be more creative, stop doing things or being one minute after another. Walk, go and see a magic trick, a magic show, stop for a bit, meditate. I think connecting with walking, with wonder, with not doing things, it also helps you to be more creative. And even in neuroscience, there's a definition. Creativity lies between precrastination and procrastination. Procrastination is not doing anything, there's even a bias, if you're not doing anything, you're being lazy. No, you also be creative. So even thinking of yourself as someone creative when you stop doing things is also pretty counterintuitive, Hey, Patty, you want to be more creative? Stop having meetings all day long. Have some time to walk, have some time to reflect, have some time to look at the ceiling, and not doing anything. So that's the model. Self, Lila, obsess, and Wu Wei, or if you want, walk or wander.
Oh my God. That's like a whole episode just right there, just in that one acronym. I love that.
Yeah.
And for me, the wonder is really interesting because, like you say, we often are in a work environment and the bosses will say, we want you to be more creative. We want to be more innovative. Let's all do some brainstorming. Let's run a brainstorming workshop. And,
Yeah.
and we're almost told to switch on our creativity at that moment. And for the next 10 minutes or whatever, we're going to work in groups. We're going to come up with all of our best ideas. And that could be at the end of a really hard, long day. And your brain is just fried. And you've been on back-to-back meetings all day. And the facilitator is there really trying to, get those ideas, extract those ideas somehow from your heads. But
Yeah.
you've just not had that time and space to really get creative. Right. So
Yeah.
I totally connect with that.
When you see people at work, you pretty much see them as a sponge, and the sponge is pretty much squeezed up. There's nothing. You need to put water into it. You need to water your sponge. And most of the people, you can do brainstorm, but if you don't have the space for people to charge up, to water themselves as a sponge, you will get ideas probably, but not very good ideas. So I think that's the key. And when you see neuroscience, if you look it up now, Patty, you can find that creativity lies between pre and procrastination. So an indicator of your level of creativity as a team or as a group is the time you allocate for not doing things or stopping. So even if you have an hour a day to just stop, read a book, doing something else, you're being more creative with that. So instead of saying to your boss, hey, what are you doing? I'm not doing anything. Yes, I'm being creative. I need to stop. When you say that, it's not, of course, it's because people are stressed, but I think we need to see it as an important part of life. And let me share that a short quote, I think that summarizes this. It's from an author which I love. She's called Madeline Dorr. She has one of the best books of productivity I've ever read, which is called "I Didn't Do the Right Thing." I love the title because always productivity is about that. I didn't do this. Oh, I didn't do this. What if, right? She says there are myriad things that might have happened despite what we did or didn't do. There are far more life and vibrancy to discover in days that ebb and flow than in streamlined, optimized days. We forget we want the symphonies produced by the orchestra, not one flat note. Well, I love that quote. We have to be not more productive, we have to be more fecund. I think productivity is such a harmful word because it pretty much assumes you're like something that needs to be squeezed until it's burned out. I think that's a mistake also. We need to talk about the value of stopping. When you talk about a plant grows because not only you water it, because it receives sun, because it mulches, because you put manure into it, it's all those things enrich them, your kids enrich you. Patty as a person is a more creative person when he receives not only input from people, from friends, when he reads, listens to music, all of that creates you being more fecund, not just more productive.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. And I love your book recommendations, by the way, because I know lots of people love book recommendations. And it's always great to get some of those from our guests. So thank you for that. Well, we're fast approaching time, so I can't believe just how quick this episode has gone by. But before we finish up, I'm going to ask you one of my other favorite questions. And I didn't pre-warn you on this one, Antonio. So if you could have any superpower to abolish something in the world of work, like if you could take it away, and we're going to do it for 24 hours because I don't want to mess things up too much. So what would that thing be? What's that thing that really gets you mad or you really get frustrated with?
Yeah. I think one of the things that when we don't value people's stories, when people start sharing about their lives and we pretty much cut them off, like saying, hey, we don't have enough time for this. I think we should abolish that. We think, and by the way, Brené Brown, I think you know her, she pretty much says the key for emotional connection, one of the key things, she did a study on this, is being a story steward in your team, as a facilitator. Take care of the stories people tell you, value them, honor them, keep them, and believe them. So I think one thing I would abolish is for people to stop this thing about, hey, let's work. Hey, right? Let's make this meeting productive. I think we're also being much more productive if I know you, I know your story, because when I know that story, I understand why you do things. I think one thing I will abolish is that. And I think I would abolish this may be counterintuitive. I would abolish meetings because we put a thing on the calendar and most of the times, or 50% or 60%, we don't know what is it for. We don't have meeting with purpose. I would prefer people to talk with one another. Hey, I think we should meet. I would abolish this. I imagine if you see your agenda, I see my agenda, it's filled with meetings. I hope not. But I think I would abolish meetings as such, as a given. I think we should meet, but it should have a purpose. And that is something I read years ago, not even before I was a facilitator, from an author called Priya Parker. She says, purpose is key. Purpose moves everything. So if you have a purpose, you know when to meet, who to meet with. So I would abolish that. Yeah. And I would abolish the idea of saying you are such and such, because I think that also limits us. We're limitless. But if we start saying, hey, Patty, you're an engineer, or in my case, I'm an engineer. If I say I'm an engineer, you pretty much cut off 90% of what I am. Stop. When you introduce someone, hey, Patty's cool, instead of us saying Patty is that and such and such. I would also abolish that, because that puts tax into us, and those tax even limit our own world. I think that also sucks.
Oh, thank you so much for those. And yeah, I totally agree with all of those. There's actually an episode I did with a guy who did the most substantial study into no meeting days. So what he looked at what's the optimum number of days in a week where if you didn't have any meetings, we would be super productive. So yeah, that's a really fascinating episode. That's with Mr. David Pereira was
Yeah,
the
okay.
guest. So yeah,
I will look into that. I love it.
that link.
I know an author that also says, Donna McGeorge, she has a book called The 20-Minute Meeting. You can do a meeting in just 20 minutes if you plan it correctly. So I will love it. And I even finishing this, I will go ahead and listen to that episode because I love the idea of having no day meetings. I love it.
Oh, awesome. Well, folks, it's the end of another episode. So I'm just going to thank Antonio for your time today. It's been super as always, and just so many insights you've shared in such a short amount of time. But if people want to continue the conversation with you, Antonio, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, they can follow me on LinkedIn. You can write, as my name says, Antonio Iturra. You can find me, Antonio Iturra. I think it's with an N. So Antonio Iturra. In LinkedIn, you will find me. And even in my description, have a little light bulb. So you probably will notice that. I'm thinking on my LinkedIn, I put myself as a slow creative. So you can also find me with that. And also on Substack, I'm trying to write a lot on Substack. So you can also find me on Substack. And I have a channel on Instagram that I'm trying to regrow because I created it. I didn't do much with it, but I think I will do that now that I'm focused on finishing my book, which is called The Everyday Created. That's my Instagram channel. I will try to put creative insights or advice. So that's it. On my email, if you want, you can check my email. Patty can put my email on the description. If you want to contact me, it would be a pleasure to talk with you.
Oh, brilliant. And I'll share all those links as well in the show notes. So thank you so much once again, Antonio.
Yeah, you're welcome, pal.
It's the end of another episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please do connect with me via LinkedIn and drop me a message and let me know your favorite takeaways from the episode. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Superpower School newsletter so that you can be notified of all future episodes. Simply visit the website www.superpowers.school. Thank you once again.